Linda, you out of the slideshow mode again. Okay, we'll just wait a moment. We've still got 2 minutes just to make sure everybody who would like to join has the opportunity to do so. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to one of our committee members, Linda Bosman. She is heading up our SIGS and RIGS, so she's going to give you or share with you today some of our early concepts on how we can drive research through SIGS. So Linda, many thanks for taking on this portfolio and for all the hard work behind the scenes to put this together. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Linda. Thank you. Linda, you're muted.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, we can now hear you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Julieta, for the opportunity to do this. I'm Linda Bosman, and I feel a little lightweight to share the platform with the giants that presented before me, but in any case, I'll try to stand tall today. Just for you who do not know me, I was with SIGS since its establishment in 2011 as a member, and later joined the steering committee, and only recently became the mother of the RIG portfolio. So I'm really excited to introduce the special interest groups that we now prefer to call the research interest groups, and to put it out there so that you know how we can respond to the question. In this session, then, I want to introduce the special interest groups and just explain the birth of the concepts, and then unpack what the SIGS are and the RIGS are and what they plan to do in 10 goals. Give you an overview of the current SIGS that we have, and Eric and Melandra already added to that agenda, and then also just to discuss the next steps. Now, SIGS, as Julieta mentioned earlier this morning, is about 10 years old, and I've witnessed its growth over the past years. The first conference where it was established was in 2011, and I can really say that SIGS has grown up. At our recent conference in July that was attended by delegates from across the ECD sector, we were really overwhelmed by the quality of the presentations, but also the response to and the overall depth of the discussions following the presentations. And people even navigated the virtual platform in a beautiful way so that we could experience a world-class conference. But from that conference, we could see that the ECE community is really hungry for discussion and debates and initiatives, and to get together and to collaborate, and to unite, to drive ECD forward in South Africa. So at the conference, we invited our delegates that came across all sectors to come forward with their interests in order to establish those special interest groups that usually form part of a research association, because we felt that we need to do that now. After 10 years, we need to get our special interest groups going. So our members from our delegates came from all sectors, and they came forward with a large variety of interests. And these are important because these interests represent their realities and therefore worthy of attention. It's really clear that the ECE community is working hard, but often in silos, to produce knowledge that is often unheard by important audiences, like the general public, academics, policymakers, and the people who determine children's futures. So we realized that our role as a research association is really very important. And to us, early childhood research is any type of inquiry that focuses on individuals, both the adults and the children, but also the practices, policies, and institutions involved in the care and education of children between birth and 9. So all of us at this seminar today, anyone working with or on behalf of children, doing research with or on behalf of children in birth to 9. And it's absolutely needless to point out this fact to this audience, but as Hasina and others also pointed out, the science of early childhood is conclusive, yet so often ignored in our country. But all of our investments, our interventions, the policies we implement can have lifelong implications for children. So we take decisions during a time in their lifespan where our decisions will determine their futures. And therefore, we feel as a research association that our decisions should be handled with care. So we often see that the research that is out there, it emphasizes the weaknesses, the gaps, the disparities, the inequalities, and the consequences of the social, political, and education system failures. So we can measure the outcomes on national and international evaluations. We have the statistics, we have abundance of findings that point to a very bleak picture in terms of early childhood in South Africa. But we feel that all policy developments, investments, interventions should be research informed in order to offer a contextually appropriate and locally relevant response. So that is what we need, and what SIGS is pushing for is to produce research that can be put into action. We realize the importance of our existence as a research association and the important role we play in research, especially research for impact, to drive ECE forward. And to close that policy practice research gap that we often have. So that has led us to this question that we are debating today. And these main ideas that have shaped our identity of the RIGS. Initially, as I explained, we started off with special interest groups asking delegates to just bring forward the things that are important in their areas, in their context, but we expanded them into research interest groups to emphasize the research part, with a particular emphasis on collaborative research, because we think that collaboration between key role players are instrumental, but also then research that can drive change in purposeful ways. So what the RIGS are? As I explained, our identity is still developmental, so we will shape our identity as we go forward. But at this stage, we see the RIGS as communities of researchers within SARISI, but with a shared goal of leading efforts or projects to strengthen early childhood in South Africa. And because collaboration with key stakeholders is at the heart of our RIGS, we see the RIGS as cross-national, cross-sector, multi-level, multidisciplinary teams of researchers that work together to produce locally relevant knowledge that can be put into action so that we can impact on sustainable early childhood practice, policy and professional development. SARISI are extensions of, the RIGS are extensions of SARISI. So they will function to promote SARISI's aims and ideals, as Julieta explained them this morning. But we also see the RIGS as inclusive, collective, and critical voices for ECD in South Africa. So our first goal, and also the purpose of today's meeting, is that we invite stakeholders to help us determine the research needs in South Africa, to help us determine and define the issues that deserve research and debate, so that we can identify the critical issues that can benefit from strategic partnerships, so that we can form research teams from across all nations, borders, sectors, levels, disciplines and so forth. And we also feel that our research agenda will signal the priorities to relevant stakeholders so that we can plan for an appropriate response through research projects. Another goal is to respond to research needs in the best way, and obviously it will be our obligation to respond to international and locally set targets for ECD advancement as expressed in influential reports like the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the National Development Plan. But also we should also respond to current and urgent research needs and challenges of today. Eric and others have brought forward all kinds of issues that are challenges for today, like the pandemic, the DBE census, ECE moving to DBE. So those are things that are urgent and should be addressed now. And at SARISI, we have the relevant expertise. You've heard at the beginning, we have a whole team of experts, experienced researchers, NRF-rated researchers, so we are able to respond and in the best way. Another goal is also to promote dialogue. Over and above SARISI's usual conferences and seminars, RIGS will organize regular in-between meetings and information sharing events. We will have forums, workshops, seminars like today, and other scholarly activities that will bring people together, experts in their fields, around topics, so that we can critically debate and talk and plan the best response ahead. In building towards a stronger ECE system, increased and strategic partnerships and dialogue between key role players across the ECE sector is absolutely crucial. And we feel to build that better, we need to consult with and collaborate with key role players, like the people here today, to really connect and build networks and promote collaboration in our own country and beyond, but also between the ECD sectors. There are many private institutions and so forth So the key role players can be anyone working with or on behalf of children, childcare providers, lecturers, academics, students in training, postgraduate students, researchers, and so forth. And finally, also children, because I think it was Melandra and Kelly who pointed out that children are also important partners in these research projects. We need to listen to their voice as well. At this conference, we heard the voices of the practitioners, teachers in the field. These voices are usually unheard or silent very often, but our research projects will also include them to combine the expertise of researchers and the wisdom of practitioners, because they can enrich knowledge production in significant ways. So we also, another goal is to advance impactful early childhood research. Our ultimate goal is to improve the quality of ECD provision, to optimize child benefits, obviously. But that will also mean that we produce research outcomes that can contribute to knowledge, policy, practice, ECD research methodology in meaningful and significant ways. And that will mean that we will have to form strategic and sustainable partnerships with key stakeholders, work together to produce solution-focused research that can address the critical areas, but also to use inspired, practice-oriented and strategic approaches that can address the real-world issues in ECD. And then obviously our knowledge should be put into action so that we can ultimately achieve the changes that we require. As a research association, an important goal is to strengthen the research competence, capacity, and impact. We aim to promote high-quality research in the field of early childhood education. But that is a challenge for most of us, as Mary and others pointed out. Often the people's position in an institution or the opportunities they have at their institutions where they work, it depends on where you are, the opportunities you have. And obviously, as Mary also pointed out, as women, we have a huge baggage that we have to carry as women, but also as working women. So there are many challenges, but also it is important for any research project. All the researchers need to be aware of contemporary research approaches that are in line with rights and strengths-based views of children and childhood, and what all these implications have for the research choices that we make. So that is an important part of our role as a research association, is to educate people, but also make sure that the projects that we drive keep the contemporary issues and approaches in mind. It is important for us also to increase the number and capacity of ECD researchers across all levels and sectors, including people that work with children in the field, not necessarily at academic institutions, because they have the wisdom and they have they contribute a very important perspective to understanding issues. So even people that are not part of academic institutions, the NPO sector, all levels and all sectors, will form part of the RIG teams, research teams. As Professor Jansen also mentioned, we need to work hard to cultivate the next generation of ECE researchers, and also to improve the seniority and to make sure that we target the people that have potential and invest in their potential, so that we can also build and broaden the research capacity. Our seventh goal will be to secure funding for collaborative projects. We all know that projects cannot be done without Funding, so sustainable funding that will allow research to flourish in a financially sustainable manner. And I'm really grateful for Tracy Clarenbeek at the NRF, who will be telling us a little more about how to apply for and the opportunities and the what is available in terms of funding for collaborative projects. But that will also be part of our role as the RIGS roles. Like Hasina mentioned the importance of evidence generation and communication. So as RIGS, we will also need to communicate our research findings clearly and effectively to a variety of stakeholders, like the public sector. We will have briefs. There's currently an e-book happening. We will use our social media platforms. Obviously, if we have research outputs, the reports will go to government so that they can use the outcomes of the research to plan their interventions and so forth. But our responsibility is also towards the scientific community through the channels that we currently have. But communication to audiences at different levels will be part of our role. Professionalization of the sector. I heard Nasima and Julieta have a conversation about this. So ECE is a specialized field. We all know that. Not anyone can just do ECE. But it's also a relatively emergent academic field. But ECE is young but upcoming, and we see research as a powerful tool in developing early childhood professionalism. I'm just thinking here about Hasina and Julieta, the project that they have now, the Google Forms that we all need to fill in about the terminology. And it's important for the professionalization of the sector to use consistent, affirmative, inclusive, and sector accepted language. But also we need to learn the words of research, especially in contemporary terms. And I'm also thinking about the workforce needs that they mentioned. We need to think about more and better qualified people that can go into practice, especially now with ECCE moving to DBE, but also the needs of academics and supervisors, researchers, and so forth. The final goal that I have today is it is really time for SARISI to raise its voice, to be visible, to be influential. As Eric said, now is the time. Hasina said SARISI should be the go-to organization for anyone who wants to do research in ECE. Nasima mentioned SARISI should be a powerhouse. So those are all powerful descriptions of what SARISI aims to do. And I've captured Hasina's words there, research as activism. So that is something that we want to promote with our RIGS to strengthen SARISI's research profile, but also our power and authority so that we eventually can have impact and increase our membership so that we can unite and drive ECD forward in South Africa. I have not even discussed the proposed way of work with the committee. So I'm reluctant to do this, but I've tried to think of ways of how the RIGS will be put into action. So I'm going to mention it so that it's open for discussion, but I can see that we will have some kind of system on our website where anyone that wants to propose a research project can submit the request on the website or to the coordinator, where the SARISI team will review the request, make decisions regarding the significance, relevance, and so forth, and then start thinking about a team of experts around the proposed topic, and then to make recommendations for a course of action, how to best respond, who will be the team, what will be the research methodology, where will we start, what kind of methodology will we implement, and so forth. And then the SIGS will drive and oversee and monitor the research process and eventually communicate this cooperatively produced knowledge to the relevant audiences. So that is the initial thinking about the way of work of the RIGS. So what I have here is just the SIGS, and I've cut and pasted the ideas from the July conference so that you can have an overview of the things that the people came forward with, people that are interested in ECCE birth to 4, advocacy or activism, and then kinds of disciplines like early literacy, early mathematics, science, technology, engineering, social studies that is often ignored in our country. Then things like digital education, shaping digital futures, transformative pedagogies, already there for valuing children's rights and strengths, but also rethinking play. So the transformative kinds of pedagogies are already captured there. Working with children from foreign backgrounds, with linguistic and cultural diversity, inequality, gender issues like gender equality, gender education, then health and well-being issues. There were also issues for family, community, and engagement and so forth. People who are interested in curriculum, assessment, policy and practice, leadership and management, and then all kinds of workforce development, professional development, professional identity, and so forth. And then there was quite a number of people who are interested in ECD research that I'm really excited about. So participatory research in ECD, practitioner inquiry, then particular theoretical and conceptual frameworks, the things that Professor Jansen this morning pointed out. We have quite a number of problems relating to ECD research that he picked up on. So this RIG will help us address those issues and think of the best way to move forward. It will award opportunity for critical questions, critical engagement, and to address those challenges mentioned by Professor Jansen. Now, I haven't added yet all the new interest that Eric mentioned. So he mentioned 7. I've captured them, so I'll add them to this list. But I think at this stage, I want to ask you for your contribution. Maybe just tell us about the project that you are involved in. We need your wisdom and insight. So what are your special interests? What are the areas in need of research? If you have any suggestions or contributions for us on moving the RIGS forward, the time is now. Thank you, Julieta. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see
the hand.
So that I can see the hand, but I'm also going to ask our committee members if there are questions to also respond. So stop presenting. Sorry for that.
No problem, Linda.
Okay.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for that very thorough presentation, and also for putting forward a basic strategy to start the ball rolling. I like your suggestion of opening the floor to our colleagues today to perhaps share some of the research that they are currently involved in, and then obviously comments from the presentation itself. So I don't know if anybody would like to be brave enough to share any research that they are doing. Seeing any hands at the moment. I can share something from my side. Apart from being president of SIGS and also working at a private higher education institution, I also run an NPO in the Eastern Cape called Africa A+ Schools, and we are presently involved in a 5-year project of improving the quality of teacher education in the Kocha district. And because it is a 5-year project, we are gathering very rich and useful data. So hopefully we will see over a 5-year period the impact of our implementation. So far, we have just entered the second half of our first year, our second year, my apologies, and we have already seen a marked improvement in the quality of learning that's happening in the classroom, and that is despite a pandemic. So very exciting to see how that project unfolds and to be able to ultimately share a long-term project with colleagues. So I have now been brave enough to share with all of you. Anybody else who would like to share research that they are presently involved in? Nasima, can you perhaps comment on any of the work from the transformative pedagogy portfolio at this point?
Thank you, Julieta. Yes, I can. We actually, the project, as some people might know, was funded by the European Union and the Department of Higher Education. And to date, on the progress of the policy, project, we have published quite a few articles, journal articles. We have also submitted a proposal for a book to be published by Springer, and that proposal has actually been accepted. We've received very positive feedback. So
Yes.
yeah, that was the progress on we went far beyond the initial deliverables of the project.
Yes.
We focused on the other end, we also focused on we took a project also as part of this project in during COVID-19, and what were the experiences of early childhood practitioners in a high-risk area, and that part of this project, that program also went quite well. So yes, we've also, apart from the transformative pedagogy project, I've also done some work on participatory pedagogies, which has been published. So there is a great need for pedagogies that affirm children's voices, and how and approaches in pedagogy that calls for a social justice issue, that emanates from a social justice issue. So, changing the line of thinking into new ways of reconceptualizing early childhood pedagogy.
No, fantastic and lovely to hear that the project has sort of grown over time because it's such an important area. What would be useful is if we could get some input from our delegates today about the strategy that Linda has put forward, even just at the purely practical level. If SIGS were to log a form on our website, would people be interested in filling that in presenting it to the committee, having that kind of support and oversight? Would be useful to know if that's a good approach for us to adopt. I'm not seeing any hands up at this point. Hasina, you muted?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, so when I looked at the kinds of steps that you are looking at, so SIGS will play a role of coordinating the process of, this is my understanding, and it will also filter the projects that are going to be aligned to its vision and its goals, I suppose. Yeah, I think that the people that should be engaged in this whole process of whether, you want to, because it's quite a novel way of approaching it. It also makes an assumption that SIGS has the money to fund the projects.
Yes,
yeah,
make that assumption.
So, how is that going to work? Who's going to fund the projects?
Yes, I think that's a very key point you're raising, Hasina. I think we have to be careful that we address that assumption. There may be funds available to assist with some research. Obviously, we're going to hear from Tracy as well after this presentation, but we can't assume it. It may also be that it's a collaborative effort. In other words, somebody approaches us, they fill in the form, they do have funding, but perhaps they don't have the experience to drive the project successfully yet, or feel they need some mentorship in doing that. So maybe we are sharing our skills and expertise, or maybe we are assisting with some sort of co-funding. So there could be different models of approaching the issue on the table. But I think what we really need to unpack and get some feedback from delegates is any of that useful? Because there's no point in us saying, well, we're happy to drive research, but if people don't come to us with their research, then we can't really drive it. We can only drive our own in-house projects. So it would be useful for delegates to just comment perhaps on any of that. I'm just checking the chat in case anybody's written anything there. Our delegates are remarkably quiet. I have a feeling we might have exhausted them all already.
Julieta?
Yes, Ms. Sima.
Yes, I think the question of funding is very important, okay? And, you know, I'm hoping that our next presenter, like you said, would be able to channel us in the direction of how our possible projects could be funded.
Yes.
And of course, my thinking is possibly, you know, they would need interested researchers might need some informed or experienced researchers to sort of lead the projects, because that is one avenue that NRF also looks for in terms of the viability of the project and how strong it is to call for appropriate funding. But the NRF might be one avenue to look at. We might also want, like I mentioned at an earlier meeting with you, we might have to look at other funding resources in terms of how we might, although nothing promised because we don't have anything confirmed yet, how we might look at other funding opportunities for possible upcoming projects.
Thanks, Nasima. I mean, another strategy is that we identify one of the, or a couple of the topics that have come up, either in our list of RIGS/SIGS or arising from this meeting. And then we actually actively go out, get the funding for it, and then also within our membership and committee members, seek like-minded people who would like to participate in that research. So in other words, it's the other way around. It's not our members coming to us, filling in a form and saying, this is what we would like to do research on, but we determine it from this sort of stakeholders meeting and from our feedback from the conference, and then look for the like-minded people that we have on our books, or possibly even post some sort of notice to our or email to our members. And then from there, we bring together that community of practice to conduct the research. So it's sort of, it flows in two different directions depending on, you know, the interest, the funding, the issue on the table.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. But I think also it might be good because we have a lot of emerging researchers that are part of SIGS, and it might be a good idea to empower them in a way to, you know, possibly come with their proposals to us, and let's see, they might be possible PhD candidates, you know, master's studies candidates or part of an NGO, and see how we can actually help to empower them. That's just a thought, but we can discuss that later. Thank you, Julieta.
Pleasure. I think just to build on what you're saying, Nasima, I think what is also, and we mentioned it in my presentation, and I think Hasina as well, is that the importance of that networking. So as you've said, you may have a PhD student who wants to study a particular area, but has challenge in accessing that information or conducting their field work or whatever. If they are able to tap into the different SIGS networks, it could open the door to their accessing information. So for example, you may have a student doing a PhD who wants to tap into the NGO sector, but doesn't have a link to do that. However, if they're part of SIGS, they may then be put in touch with relevant people to approach. So I think there's also that. And similarly, our delegates can tap into SIGS as well and say, we need support in finding this sort of information or linking up with somebody in this aspect of the ECE sector. Can you assist us in that regard? So, I view that as being a part and parcel of the SIGS/RIGS.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, to build a little bit more on what Linda's shared in her session today, we don't only view the SIGS/RIGS as now we must rush off and go and do research. We also view them as very important contributors to the website. So if you are involved in a special interest group and you would like to contribute something to our website about your special interest group, that is something we would be open to. The obvious one, of course, presenting at regional and national conferences. Very important to get people who are like-minded together to share their information. So, the actual research part is an important aspect of it, but it has these other arms involved. Linda, any final thoughts before we go to the next session?
Not at the moment. Thank you, Julieta. As I mentioned, this is a development. It was conceptualized in August, so it's entirely new and still developmental. So we will build and change and move forward. Yeah, so it's developmental. So we'll find our path.
Super. Thanks, Linda, and thanks for all your efforts on this. I think I'd just like to charge our delegates with giving us some feedback. If you can't think of anything now or you're exhausted from our meeting at this point in time, you are always welcome to email us with suggestions that you might have. So, please feel free to convey your thoughts to us. As Linda's just said, this is a new process for us. We are being as innovative as we possibly can. We are definitely not following small imaginations, other Jonathan Jansen. All right, I'm going to hop out of this session. We have a session coming up now from Tracy from the NRF. So please join me on that side. Thank you so much. And thanks, Linda.